is we still have a whole bunch of condo product sold in 2021, 2022, which was priced at 1,600 a square,
Right.
which still needs to reprice because it hasn't yet closed. You simply can't pencil a project at today's rates. And as a result, vast number of projects have been canceled. Very few have gone forward because the federal government has massively screwed up the immigration file in previous years. And the fact that John Tory was taking his $53,000 extra dollars per unit didn't affect that very math. But splash, the bubble has popped. And with the popping of the bubble, we have a the market is very bifurcated, and it really depends on who it is that you're actually speaking to in a given moment, which leads you to the conclusion as to whether or not we're in terrible peril, the sky is falling, or everything's going just fine. And the truth is, if we were to talk about it on balance, in aggregate, the market is actually probably doing okay. Pricing hasn't gone up very much at all. It's kind of traveled sideways, but in some respects, given that we have all now in retrospect, although we kind of probably realized it as well as we were leading up to it, gone through a bubble, the best way to emerge from the bubble is slowly and with purpose. And the way we're doing that is we're traveling sideways on our real estate pricing while inflation continues to eat away at the actual price. This has the effect of not affecting LTV values. That is to say, if you borrowed 80%, it remains 80% because the value of the property remains 80%. And it's not plummeting in any significant degree. And so for the vast majority of the real estate market, and they're experiencing what is effectively almost normalcy back in the cycle. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not areas of acute pain. There are areas of acute pain. And the area of acute pain, which constitutes about 5 to 6% of the market, I estimate, is in new build construction. Because I think we discussed this last time I was on your show. The simple fact is we still have a whole bunch of condo product sold in 2021, 2022, which was priced at 1,600 a square, which still needs to reprice because it hasn't yet closed. Therefore, people are able to kind of just keep on holding their breath for a bit. But those properties are scheduled to come to fruition come 2025, 2026, meaning that people are going to have to crystallize their loss. And whereas they purchased for 1,600 a square, equivalent buildings are selling for 1,000 a square, there's a 60% loss still to be taken. And so you see huge problems in the assignment market that is illiquid because the assignments that are trying to be moved are the assignments specifically from the 2020, 2021 cycle. You see problems in the people who have closed on those new build products that have overpaid and are kind of sticking to their price. And of course, you're seeing the misappraisals in those areas. And so if you speak to someone who's primarily in the new build space, the sky is actually falling. And if you speak to people in the assignment space, you will hear of problems all the time. And if you speak to a real estate lawyer like me, the people who are coming to me are not the people who are just kind of hanging on and they're the 92, 93% of the market that everything is fine. They're just kind of hanging on. They're the people in acute pain. And so we have a predilection to actually assume that the market is far worse than it is because the people who are in the severe pain, and there are quite a few people who are in severe pain, are sitting there every day saying, hey, can you speak to me? Can you deal with my file? Oh my God, what do I do? Oh my God, I'm going insolvent. And so we see power of sales are on the rise in certain areas, and we see sort of not anything significant, but they're doubling or whatever it may be from a very, very low historical average. We're seeing people who are being forced to close and can't do it. We're seeing these misappraisals, and all of these stories, even though they seem replete, are actually very much located to acute areas of pain in the economy, whereas the larger picture, which you will sometimes hear from realtors, and which is actually the case, is, well, if I purchased in 2012 and the value went up and I didn't massively refinance my property and it fell a little, or it just kind of stayed and it's just kind of hovering, there's no real major effect. And so people are still in the resale space. They're still transacting. The volumes are going up. There's normalcy as people kind of appreciate the new normal that exists. And On balance, we're doing okay. We're going to come out of this. But the acute pain means that there's a lot of people who are in a lot of trouble still, and a lot of people who are trying to take advantage of that trouble. And that acute pain is something that if you are in real estate, you encounter all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it seems like two different worlds, like pre-construction and then resale. Okay, I guess we could talk about pre-construction. Like, aside from the people who bought 4, 5, 6 years ago who are going to be closing, um, with new projects, are you seeing a lot of new projects come up, or are they on
No,
hold, or like what's the
no.
deal?
No, so there's
Oh,
two problems with the new construction space. The first is those people who purchased at values that just make no sense.
yeah.
And by the way, two people's credit, two large builders' credits. There
Mm,
were a lot of builders who took advantage of that pricing discrepancy and sold out at 1,600 a square. But you know who didn't? The Mintos, the Tridells, and everything else. In fact, if you look at, like, say, a Tridell product that came out at the height, um, Westerly 2, or whatever it may be. I mean, they were selling at $1,000 a square foot, which is exactly where things are right now, right? Like Mintos and Tridells and the big guys,
mm-hmm.
they never went as crazy as some of the smaller guys. And so you're also seeing the problem in the smaller and the mid-sized projects and everything else, where people were massively overextended on land costs and everything else. But so we have that particular problem. We've talked about that. We have another problem, which is that papers simply don't pencil. I mean, it's all well and good that the price is $1,000 a square foot, and it's all well and good that we're no longer expecting real estate to go up by 10% per year. But what that means is when we have taxes that are constituting 30% of the price of a product, when you
Mm-hmm.
purchase in Toronto, when you factor in development charges, Section 37 levies, park levies, land transfer tax, HST, all of the taxes, well, people can't make their projects pencil. Now, to some degree, that is taken care of by a commercial market that is markedly more efficient than residential. In 2022, when the cycle ended, a lot of people's land acquisition and holdings were devalued on an accounting basis by 40%. That is to say, 60% of the value of the property was considered real. A lot of people wrote off the loss through their books. Some people were forced to sell at losses. And as a result, some land has reevaluated based on the reality that you can't build at 1,600 a square anymore because no one can pay it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there is some reevaluation, but for the vast majority of people who have acquired land, you simply can't pencil a project at today's rates. And as a result, vast number of projects have been canceled. Very few have gone forward. The projects that I have seen that have been successful, worryingly for me, have telltale signs of the very things that caused the panic in the first place, the bubble in the first place. That is
Right.
to say, they have like incredibly long construction periods where they're promising delivery in 2031, and they're promising 5% down per year, year over
Wow.
year going forward. You do not see, with some exceptions, you don't see significant amount of projects coming to bear. And that brings you to the second problem, which is we are going to have an acute shortage of properties um, in the coming years, in the year 3 years out, 4 years out, whatever it may be, because we're going to have peak deliverables in about 2026, 2027. And then from there, our deliverables start plummeting, which may affect supply, may affect demand, but then has to be balanced as against our previous trait, which is immigration. The interesting thing about immigration, I'm sorry, I'm speaking a lot here, but the interesting thing
Oh,
about
that's fine.
immigration, and what most people don't really consider, is that immigration is something where if you cut the numbers, you actually cut them severely in the year you cut projected numbers. And the reason for that is because the vast majority of people who are going to become permanent residents are already in the country. That is to say, they're already on open work permits.
Okay.
They're already in the process. And what that means is they are already generating economic activity for Ontario. They're here. They're already here. And
Mm,
so when we sit there and say we're going to cut our numbers from, say, 400,000 a year to 100,000 a year, well, if you have 150,000 people already set to become immigrants, what that means is a net cut of 50,000 people coming into our country. People don't really think through exactly how this works, given the time lag of people coming into the country and then ultimately becoming permanent residents and Canadian citizens. And the federal government, because of crass politics and because the federal government has massively screwed up the immigration file in previous years, this is trying to be, I'm not trying to be political here. I'm just saying it's clear they've
Yeah.
changed course abruptly. They
Yeah.
acknowledge that there is a significant problem and they have effected deep cuts. We have a circumstance where we are not taking people into the country, but we are not creating new product. How that will play out is anyone's guess. We will see. But the worry that we had when the immigration numbers were 500,000 a year coming into a country of $33 million, 33 million people, is no longer 37 million, I guess, is no longer functionally the same worry as it was but a couple of months ago, given the immigration calculus that is now in play. So, as to how that plays out, we will see. We will see. One thing is true, though. There are 37 million people here. We do reproduce. Not everyone is leaving the country. We will have a need for more product over time. We are not building more product over time. And whether or not that creates an acute pain or whether that creates a dull pain going forward, I think it's fair to say that we are not prepping for the future properly, largely as a result of our overtaxation of real estate, which, as a further aside, is, by the way, the most maddening thing in the world. Like, it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. You should not look at taxation of real estate, of new real estate, as anything that makes functional sense. Let's say that you're someone who genuinely does care a great deal about progressive taxation methods. Let's just say that you think taxes should be higher. You still shouldn't support taxes on new build construction. Why? Because every time you tax new build construction, you make less of it. And the
Right.
end result of making construction and generating construction is that you have an ongoing tax for the next 60, 70 years that can be collected from the damn product, right?
Right.
That's the
Right.
whole purpose. So you are basically sitting there saying, for short-term gain, I am stymieing long-term taxation abilities. It is a totally regressive method of taxation, and I would hope that we can all agree, whether you're liberal, conservative, NDP, who cares, doesn't matter what your politics are, you have to be able to see this for what it is, which is a foolhardy decision about our future. We need more property. We need more ability to create environments where people can live. We need to lower the cost of housing for children and for our future generations. And we're doing none of that presently in Canada. All we've managed to do is somewhat lower the supply calculus going out a couple of years through immigration, which will probably be continued when the next government takes hold, because it's not as if they are campaigning on massively increasing those numbers again.
Oh, Mark's on fire. But yeah, like what is the reasoning behind these high taxes then? Like how are they justifying it? Like wouldn't it just make more sense? Like, hey, we're going to reduce the taxes, build more homes, and then people are like, wow, that's great. Okay, I'll vote for you. Like I don't see
Yeah,
the reason.
you know what the reason? There is a good reason. It's because they could.
Hmm.
When values were going up 10% per year, there was no ramification to increasing development fee. John Tory doubled development charges in the city of Toronto. He
Hmm.
doubled it. It went from $64,000 per two bedroom to $128,000 per bedroom in a single year. And no one complained and it didn't pop the bubble. And that's the reason it happened. It happened because there were still lineups out the door, and it didn't
Yeah.
matter that they were doing it. It was free money from their perspective. And to some degree, they were right. It was free money because they were participating in a bubble economy where no one cared what the price was. It was devoid of fundamentals. It was divorced from Canadian income. Everyone was investing because there was a 10% return. And the fact that John Tory was taking his 53,000 extra dollars per unit didn't affect that very math.
Hmm.
But splash, the bubble has popped. And with the popping of the bubble, we have a scenario where we're back to fundamentals. And in that same environment where a bubble no longer exists, you cannot convince someone to pay that 53,000 because it did actually push affordability over the edge. The taxes of new build product in Ontario is something which I think we're going to look back at historically and say, what were we thinking? I do
Right.
think that I think that the government has taken one very smart move which is removing HST from rental product. Perhaps the new governments that will come in next year will remove HST from all product. That's possible. That will have a significant 13% savings. There's other things that can be done. Part of the problem is, of course, our Constitution, which doesn't really allow our governments to do anything other than tax in limited ways. But particularly with the city of Toronto, that's still not an excuse. We have the lowest municipal tax rate, I think, in North America. I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts that my home can be worth $3 million and I pay $10,000 a year in municipal tax. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not an advocate for raising taxes,
Mm.
but I am. I would gladly pay $50,000 in taxation on my $3 million home here in Toronto if it meant that Ontario and the federal tax were lowered. I mean, just cut those things because I use municipal services. Everyone else uses municipal services way, 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 way more than federal services or anything else. And the municipalities are not even a mentioned entity in our constitutional framework. And as a result, they have this thing where they have to go to the province and ask for special permission and everything else. Having said that, again, even with the permissions they have, the city of Toronto has totally screwed it up and they are worried about their electoral prospects, and as a result, they've kept taxation low. And I think, frankly, they've done so at the peril of everything else. It should be the case that there is if no one else gives the city any extra money, all of the new bill taxes should be transferred over to the ongoing municipal tax base because that way we're creating more and more product, which allows for more and more product to be taxed, which allows for all of our taxes to be lowered because there's more product out there to be taxed. It's just math. So why has it happened? It happened because because other politicians took advantage of the bubble and they were not pounded in the face when they raised these things.
Right.
What's happening now is that we're back to reality and the rug has been pulled from that game. And fundamentally, they just bit off more than they could chew, such that they have made real estate investment and real estate purchasing of property a near impossibility at today's math.
So let's say the pre-construction bubble has popped, but the resale market, it seems like a lot of people were, waiting for the crash. The property value is going to go down more and more and more. Is this just like a soft landing and now it's going to start to go back up? Spring is coming up, or is there like worse things to come still?
Look, I hate when people say it's gone back up because it hasn't gone back up. Like you'll see a bunch of realtors who are sitting there going, "Oh, the market's creeping back up," but there's no analysis of inflation. You
Yeah,
can't say the market is going up if it's going up 1% per year and inflation is at 5. Because what that means is it's going down 4%. It's the same thing as those agents that sit there and say sold over asking, but they priced it at $999
yeah,
and the
yeah.
property was always worth more. Like it's
Right.
deceptive. It's not appropriate to say that. So the real question is what is happening vis-a-vis inflation? I wish there would be an agent out there that would come out and say, here's what's really happening. Here's the inflation rate, and the inflation rate was 3.7% or whatever it is. Real estate went up 2%. Therefore, the value of your property has actually dropped by 1.7%. That would be honest. That's an
Yeah.
honest discussion of where things are. Now, having said that, remember, we're all very cash focused. And the truth is, as property values go up by 1.7%, you can refinance for that much more because you're getting 80%. So people feel wealthier, but it's not an actual wealth when you negate it against inflation. So my answer to you is it is the case that real estate continues to plateau and possibly even go downwards, not upwards, downwards, but it is doing so very, very, very gradually. And
Okay.
so those people who had the sentiment to wait probably had the right sentiment for the past 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Interest rates are expected to continue to drop somewhat. The latest understanding is that they'll drop another half point, which is huge. And at some point, that is going to start lighting fires. And at some point, that may actually mean that the rate of real estate valuation exceeds what inflation is. Traditionally, we've had a 5% increase in value year over year. Who knows? We may revert to that since World War II. But right now, we are still on the small decline. I expect that now that people are sitting there saying, okay, the sky isn't falling. Okay, I'm not in that small percentage of people who are in the new build space that are in acute pain.
Right.
I've normalized. People aren't going to stop reproducing. They're still going to need things for their kids. They're still going to need. So I'm expecting normalcy. But remember what normalcy was prior to engaging in the bubble market? Normalcy was for most of us, and for many years, until probably about 2005, 2006. Many of us weren't around before then. But if you were around before then, it just meant steady, slow rise.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it seems to me like that's kind of where we're reverting back.
Yeah, no, that would be nice. Because I take a lot of heat on this channel, especially from real estate agents. Like when I always say, no, 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 it's not. We're not back to the good times. Like a lot of people are doing, FOMO and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do take a lot of heat from real estate agents. So it's kind of good to see you kind of back that up because a lot of people are saying that I'm starting to see ads like, oh, the market's back and you got to get in quick and spring's going to be nuts once again. So yeah, it's kind of good to hear you say that.
Yeah, no, and I think spring will be healthy. Like it looks that way. It looks like spring is going to be healthy. It looks
Good.
like the market is going to be healthy.
Uh-huh.
But healthy markets versus exuberant markets are
Right.
two very, very, very different things. And what we have been trained to understand real estate to be is not the post World War II historical trend. Healthy market means slight incline. And we may be going there after accounting for inflation. It may very well be that that's the case.
Hmm.
But, you know, if you jump in now or if you jump in next year, if you just have a slow and steady pace, you can do that in a measured way. You can see what's going on. You can take a look at the spring market, not feel that the spring market is going to result in you suddenly having to pay 30% more for product next year because you missed the boat. We're back to traditional real estate investing predicated upon fundamentals of cash flow, which in some way, particularly for investors, which in some way is remarkably it's relieving for those people who see this as a long-term investment because it's very hard to invest when there's irrational exuberance in play.
Before when I started, it was like steady. It was just like calm. You could go see the house a couple of times, come back, do the numbers and everything. But the last few years, it's just it's so ridiculous that like the buyers, by the time they're ready to bid, they're out of the market. So it'd be nice to kind of get back to some sort of normal
Exactly.
market.
And
Yeah.
with normalcy, by the way, comes real estate experience. Remember, I don't know if you remember this, but there used to be the rule of 1.25. I don't know if you know this. A lot of people didn't know this, but before 2005, it was regularly known. Basically, what you would do is if you wanted to figure out how much to bid on a product, you would take the asking price. You would then take however many bidders there were. Let's say that there were six. You would take 1.025. You would multiply that. You would put that to the power of six, and then you would multiply that by the purchase price because it was like almost like an interest rate. And then that would give you, as a rule of thumb, where the product was going to end up.
Mm.
Okay, like that rule of thumb existed. For those of you who don't know it, that rule of thumb just kind of existed out there. People somewhat knew that it existed. Some people used zero point 0.2, some people used 0.27, whatever it was. But people use like these types of tools. They were all thrown out the window as people just sat there bidding anything. And
Yeah.
suddenly, no, you have to use a 6% multiple times however many people were bidding. It was just nuts. It was nuts.
Yeah.
There were no fundamentals. There were no rules. There was no understanding. And in that vacuum, everything you were basing things on was a guess. It was all a guess, and it was all based on a hope that real estate would just continue this heady cycle, as opposed to there would be cash flow that would be sufficient to account for the ongoing needs and costs of the product. To some degree, it's a bit healthy to be back to places where we could establish new rules like the 1.025 or anything else going forward.